So we'll go ahead and start because it's 3 o'clock and we have a quorum. So thank you to everyone who took time to come out for this special law and licensing meeting. We really appreciate everyone's participation. I don't know, was there a sign-up sheet that's out? If you wanted to participate in public comment, there's a sign-up sheet that is probably in the hall. And if not, you can also raise your hand when we get to that portion. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Ellis. I'm the chair of the Law and Licensing Committee, and we'll go around.
Good afternoon. I'm Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy for the State Board of Education. And Kathy Helgeson, who's walking this way, is our committee staff secretary.
Cindy Davis, board member, District 9. And do I have to push this on?
Yes.
And I'm Carol Lear from District 7, board member.
Ben Rasmussen, Director of Law and Professional Practices and staff to the committee as well.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to introduce themselves and who they're representing? All right. I see some people signed up. I'm guessing that's all our visitors right here from UVU. So when we get to that point, we'll go ahead and invite some public comment. So thank you, and thank you all that could come today. I asked if our staff could just give us a little bit of history when we start this process on how we got to this spot in this law and licensing, or in this licensing process, and kind of the history of what's been going on. So I don't know if it's Travis or if you'll just introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. My name is Travis Rawlings. I'm the Educator Licensing Coordinator for the state of Utah. I'll just take a few minutes here and try to lay the background down for everyone. And we're actually going to go pretty far back. I started working at the State Board of Education in 2006, and we're going to go a little bit further back than that. And as I talk about this, I'm going to be as succinct as possible. But ultimately, until we get to 2006, I can only say that I know these things based on deduction, on second-hand accounts, those kind of things. But ultimately, I wasn't at the state office until 2006. So in the 1990s, the only preparation for teachers was universities and career and technical education. Career and technical education was the original alternative program, if you will. That was it. And right around the early 2000s, the legislature passed statute regarding competency-based licensing. And what that did was it required the board at the time to create a license that was valid only within an LEA. That's where LEA-specific licenses come from, the current version. And to have a process for which such an individual could apply for a standard license. And at that point, that's when the board created the alternative route to licensing. It was first run, as far as I can tell from the documentations I've found, 2003. So 2003, ARL starts up. Dr. Jim Schindler was charged with creating that alternative program. And for good or ill, one of the things that happened was the state office, because that's what it was called at the time, reached out to universities to look for support and help, and the decision of the deans at that time was they would do their program and not assist. And so ultimately, that's how we resulted in having education classes through Salt Lake Community College, because Dr. Schindler had contacted them. They were willing to work with us and to offer classes for working teachers to learn how to be a teacher. That was the whole point. And moving forward, this was all about the people have a different opinion on what it takes to be a teacher. The legislature and the board disagreed on what that was, and there was the legislation that forced the board to take action. And the board took some action. They created LEA specific as they were required to. They created ARL. And as you move forward through time, to 2006, 2007, what happens is you continue to have disagreements. there's these situations where, for example, in 2012, there was a proposed bill in the legislative session that was very simple. It said, you do not need to have a bachelor's degree to be a teacher in Utah. That's all the bill added. You don't have to have a bachelor's degree. And this was precipitated by one particular case of an educator who was working for a charter school that was doing what was necessary. The charter school was happy with his performance, but ultimately he did not have a bachelor's degree, and so there was no licensing route. So in response, rather than the superintendency and the leadership of the board at the time believed that that would pass. So rather than having our statute say you don't have to have a bachelor's degree, we created the expanded Eminence program. And if you look in the November meeting notes from the last few years, you'll see there's about 7 of them, situations where no other licensing route is possible. And what happens, and the reason I give you that example is because what happens is we started in the 1990s with this system, and we tweaked it, and we tweaked it, and we tweaked it. And every time there was always somebody who fell outside of the boundaries. There was ARL, by the way, personally was the legislature whose son-in-law was teaching in a private school and couldn't get a license. They were very upset about it. That's one of the driving forces. There's these anomalies that cause the issue. And then it continued because ARL, around 2012, 2016, between there, ARL had been solidified by the board as to what the rules were around that program. But that whenever you solidify rules, there's more and more cases where things fall outside. And so the board would hear from frustrated teachers, frustrated charter school directors, that this, this isn't working, ARL isn't working. And in response, in August of 2016, the board created the APT program. Because again, the ARL had these rules and the board didn't like those rules, and so they wanted another way of doing it. So again, we tweaked the system to create APT. But at that point, that's when the board realized we had been tweaking the system for so long, we had created a unreasonable monster, for lack of a better term, and decided we need to stop tweaking and we need to revamp the licensing system to truly make a licensing system that we want. And that's when the task force was created. That task force had an election right in the middle of it. So the task force worked for about 4 months. Terrell Warner was the chair of that task force. There was an election, there were new members brought in, old members that were no longer part of it, and they worked through that year and ultimately came to the 3-tiered licensing system that we talk about now. But ultimately, there were some really important guidelines that the task force gave to staff moving forward. And you've heard me talk about these multiple times. But the idea being a license is intended to indicate a minimum level of competency, a minimum level of skills and knowledge to prevent harm. That's the purpose of a license in any field. And so that's how we were directed. And in order to do that, to be consistent, that was the next goal. Because in the old system, we had ARL, we had universities. Universities had to have a 3.0 GPA to get into their program. ARL, you had to have a degree with these classes. And APT, you just had to take a test. It was so inconsistent that we were directed to try to design a system that was as consistent as possible. And focusing on the competencies, focusing on the outcomes, because those minimum skills and knowledge necessary to prevent harm. That's the purpose of a license. And so one of the things that when you look at licensing from other professions, an independent verification of those skills and knowledge is very important. And so as you go forward and you look at these things today and these rules, just bear in mind that we started with a system that was just universities. And it did take 20 years, but we ended up with the system we had when APT was created. That's where that system led to. So That was what I had prepared. If there are any other questions, Chair, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, I have a question. So I am curious. Thank you. I have a question. On most of us, besides Brittany, weren't on this committee last year, and so I'm just wanting to know how many rules are associated with the change that came out of the task force, this three-tiered approach.
So it's, I couldn't give you the exact number off the top of my head. It's between 15 to 20.
Okay.
If you look at
Have those all been worked on, or are we still?
We're in the process still.
Okay.
If you look at the study session materials that was presented, if you remember, I had to hurry and go through that.
Yeah.
There's a particular slide that actually lists all the rules that need to be changed and their current status. It's actually on that slide. And I'd be happy to send that to you as well.
It should be in board docs. Yeah,
I think it was February, yeah.
Does anyone else in the committee have a question?
I was just wondering if anyone on this committee was on the task force that
I was.
Carol was.
In a second part of the task.
And
So use your lights. If you,
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah.
You were there the whole time. You were there the second half of the
Yeah.
time.
Okay. Did you have a question?
Yeah, is mine on?
Yes.
Okay. I just wondered, do we have the recommendations that came from that task force? Okay.
Provide
we could
it, though.
provide those, yeah.
Okay.
absolutely.
I guess I may be curious what those actual recommendations were a little bit too.
Thank you. All right. I don't see any other questions, so thank you. We'll go ahead and move to agenda item 1.1, which is R277-301. And do you want me to do it since I'm the one that's proposing the change? Sure. So this rule has already was in the process of coming out of committee, and based on a lot of feedback from the community and people concerned about the pedagogical standards, I just am proposing that we change the word superintendent to and approved by the board for the pedagogical assessment standards. And my reasoning is I think it puts a protection in place for the superintendent when you have something that's can be controversial. Sometimes it's hard to deem what those things are going to be, just to have another level of eyes on it. That's in 301. Mm-hmm. This one doesn't have the other amendment, does it? That's 303.
Yeah, and then 303 has the...
Okay.
So it's on
175.
Yes, on 175, it's just adding established by the superintendent and approved by the board is my proposal for amendment. So I guess before I make a motion on that, I just wanted to see if there was any public comment on this rule. We don't have any listed. Yes, please. State your name and title, please.
Michelle Buse, Assistant Attorney General. I just wanted a clarification of when you say, is the performance assessment itself supposed to be approved by the board? Or the standards for the assessment approved by the board? Okay.
Standards.
I wasn't sure when it said and approved by the board, whether that meant that the standards were approved or the assessment itself had to be approved.
Oh.
Do you have any language that might make it more clear?
Oh, that
No,
makes...
I honestly didn't know. So when I read it, I just really didn't know. So I just wondered which one you intended it for it to be.
Board Member Earl, did you have a
Yeah, I
comment?
do. On line 76, it also talks about that same thing, so I don't know if we want to insert that same language there. The superintendent
You know
shall...
what? It should be on 173. You're right, Michelle. Right after 73, it should also be there.
Yeah.
Is that what you were
Deadlines,
saying?
procedures, and then the one below that shall review, adopt, establish passing standards for
And
all
you-
assessments required.
You said a different line. You said
So I did, it's just
69.
barely, no, 76, so there's 8 and 9, they're both right there. I had both those highlighted, just wondering if that's
You're
similar.
saying 76. You mean 176?
No,
76.
76 on,
Am I on the wrong rule?
She's
We
just
may
looking
only have
somewhere else
part
in
of
the
it.
rule.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
Not that we want to be involved in everything, but there may be some elements that we want to review and approve that. Thoughts?
Okay, let me go to Travis real quick.
My understanding was that the board did not want to be involved in the individual review of assessments and passing standards and those kind of things. So this section is not talking about the pedagogical performance standard at all. This is mostly talking about things like the praxis test, the industry standards we use for some of our CTE areas. Those are very involved processes that I mean, you can certainly change that, don't get me wrong, but it would be very involved if
so
the
it's
board
not the
wanted to get into that, just so you know.
Go ahead.
So it would be like setting the benchmark score, like you need to get a score of 120 in order to pass, or 130. So it's not the actual standards for the assessment versus the benchmark scores.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, I just
Thank
had
you.
that question where it fell under the assessment area there, so let me look back up.
So do you think that we need to change what line, oh, sorry, Board Member Lear, I can.
I personally would like the change on line 176, but don't feel like it's necessary in the earlier lines,
Okay.
76.
So what about 173?
And 173,
You want me to explain why I think that? And if that's all right, Board Member Lear, if I just explain first why I think it probably should be included on
it
173?
makes sense because it's pedagogical competencies is similar.
That's the actual standards, though, isn't it?
And it's demonstration of all shall include.
Can I talk to that statement?
I'm fine about that, too.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
173 and 169 are both talking about requirements for licensing that are more detailed, like the fact that you should have some competencies in what's taught in calculus in order to be a math teacher. It's talking about that level of detail, again, that the board has never before wished to be in, but you could be if you wanted. That's why it's worded the way it is.
Thank you. So you think it's better on 176 or 175, how it's written?
I think the amendment you've proposed in 175 is great. I would not change I would recommend that you not change 169 or 173. Because I think they're talking about two different things. But that's my recommendation.
Board Member Cummins?
Is it possible that the where available, because that's in reference to the pedagogical assessment, is confusing the sentence? So if we were to just move that and say passage of a pedagogical assessment where available, meeting standards established by the superintendent and approved by the board.
Yeah, I think that
Would
would be
that
better.
clarify the meaning?
Yes, please. Michelle?
That raises the question still, so the way you just said that, is the board going to approve every assessment that different universities create, or is the board going to approve the standards?
It's just the standards.
So we just need to watch where that and approved goes, where the approval goes, because where you just suggested, the approval comes before
Can we
standards and comes after assessment.
pass?
So if you I just want to make sure that it's clear that the approval is for the standards, not for the assessments themselves.
Go somewhere else.
We could maybe put where available at the beginning.
Why do we have where available in the sentence
I'm-
at all? Because, Travis,
So this section of the rule is talking about professional license requirements. There is no pedagogical performance assessment for school counselors. There's no pedagogical performance assessment for speech-language pathologists, so that's why we're available.
and we are giving alternate licenses to them.
No.
So it
So
doesn't
would it
seem
apply
relevant.
still
Yeah,
here?
this is everyone, remember. This is not just alternatively prepared teachers.
Oh.
This is all, in order
For
to receive a
professional.
professional license, these are the requirements you must meet.
I see.
Oh, is there a way to clarify that?
That's what I'm wondering if we can move it somewhere. I'm wondering if there's another place to move where available. Go ahead, Angie.
So Travis, one thing I was thinking we could do is put where available at the very beginning of B. So it says where available, comma, passage of a pedagogical performance assessment, meeting standards, and you could do a colon, and then do a little I, established by the superintendent and approved by the board. That way, it would be clear that the standards are what is established by the superintendent, and the standards are then approved by the board.
To be perfectly honest, I feel like this is outside my area of expertise, that
You're okay with
it makes sense to me how it's read, but that doesn't, I'm not a lawyer, so that's all I'm saying.
Board Member Davis?
Angie, I'm just wondering if we could, can I address Angie directly, Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. Instead of saying where available, could we say for professions available or where available? So that people reading the rule know that some professions will be required to do this. It's not like I can say, well, I'm teaching in a rural school, and so I don't have to do this because there are online options and things like that.
Applicable to the license area.
Yeah,
Applicable to a license area would
I like
work, I
that.
think.
Yeah.
Where
Could do that.
applicable
Yeah.
to the license area.
To the,
Or when applicable to the license area.
Yes.
Comma, we'll put that at the beginning. Then passage of the pedagogical performance assessment meeting standards, colon, and you do a little I, established by the superintendent, semicolon, and then two little I, approved by the board, period.
I think that sounds good. Do you have any questions from our legal team?
Second.
Okay, we don't have it up on the,
Oh,
Board.
no, I've got it here.
yeah.
Do you want me to write it up there?
Well, they were just, our AGs were trying to look,
I can give it.
yeah. Yeah, I like that.
Ben, can you tell me what was the phrase I said, because I didn't write down when
When
applicable?
applicable to the license area.
To the license area, thank you.
Comma,
Yes, comma. So that's what it would be.
okay. So,
That's all, sorry. Somebody wants to make a motion.
yeah, I'll make a motion. I move that we adopt R277 sorry, I guess, do I need to do this an amendment first?
I had a couple of, we didn't.
Can we do one amendment at a time? Yeah.
Yeah, so you're just going to.
I'll just do the amendment, yes.
Okay.
So I move that we amend lines 174 and 175 to read, when applicable to the license area, comma, passage of a pedagogical performance assessment meeting standards, colon, little I, established by the superintendent, semicolon, double little I, and approved by the board,
We'll do
period.
And then.
And
do the-
approved.
yeah.
Okay. Is there any discussion to that motion? Yes. Seeing none, all in favor of amending lines 174 and 175 as stated?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that amendment passes. Board Member Lear?
I just had a couple of more questions. I had a couple of questions. They aren't so much, I'm not sure I have any changes that I'm proposing. It just, again, just questions. I wanted to clarify, and goes to something that Travis said a couple of minutes ago. So if I'm understanding, because I've had this question asked me a couple of times, and I couldn't remember the answer, but it seems like reading now lines 98 through 100, that a person doesn't even have to have a bachelor's in order to have an alternative license. Is that right?
It's only for the technical field, right?
No, I don't think it, that's what I'm,
I'll let
So-
Travis
that's
answer
my...
that.
Absolutely.
Or maybe your point, maybe you're right, Cindy, and then...
Those specific lines are talking about the requirements for an associate license.
Right.
And so the reason it was worded the way it was is because you would have alternative individuals that have a bachelor's degree. You have people who are currently enrolled in an educator preparation program, meaning
For 1 month, maybe.
like a student, like a
days.
student teacher. That's who I'm talking about. A student teacher, an intern. They're enrolled in a board-approved program. So not just
Right.
any program, one of the board's approved programs, or be in that skill certificate area. Those are for the associate license.
Right, but that, it doesn't mean that the only enrolled is connected to the skill certification.
No.
That,
it's
it means you literally could be, you could be you could be enrolled for 2 days in a university preparation program and be able to get a license, an associate license, regardless of, if you wanted to get it if you were teaching English or you were teaching 5th grade. It could be anything. Is that right?
Theoretically,
Am I reading it correctly?
yes.
Okay. I just want to know the answer, because I've had that question asked a number of
Yeah.
times, and
That's certainly not the intent. The intent was to include student teachers and interns, but I see what you're saying. I'm not sure how to fix that off the
well,
top
you
of my
could
head.
fix it by saying, have at least 3 years of experience, of progress in a university program. Or, I mean, you could fix it, though. I'm not even proposing that. I just wanted to make sure I understood what
Got
this
it.
says.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Board Member Davis? Board Member Davis?
So we're not giving an associate license to an intern even though they're teaching as part of the requirement to finish their student teaching. We're not giving an associate license to an intern, is that correct?
No, we would be
We-
giving
that
it, yes.
person would have a license.
The idea is, under the current system, there's what's called a student teaching license. And the idea in the new system is that an associate license is the license you hold when you're preparing to be a teacher, whether that's alternatively, or if I'm in a university and I'm ready to do my student teaching or my internship, I get that associate license. And then when I complete my program, that's when I've met the requirements for a professional license.
So the caveat is,
Yeah, make sure your light's on. Thank you.
the caveat is the intern. We as a board are saying the intent for people working on an associate license is for, that are not in a university program, is to already have a bachelor's degree. And how do we clarify that within this?
So on line 98, it says specifically current enrollment in a university-based board-approved educator preparation program. I think maybe current and continuing might address Carol's concern, because, like, you know, I get in, and then I drop out, but I already have the associate license. That's really the only thing I can think of. To your question about the 3 years thing, I would say yes, except I've actually had a couple rural district call me and ask, how do I cover this person for 2 years while they get their bachelor's degree? Just saying.
And
Board Member Lear?
Are we okay with that?
now, I'm not okay with it, but kind of the ship left the dock, or whatever the analogy and cliche is, a long time ago. I'm not okay with it. I think it, and I think it doesn't even say it has to eventually result in it. You just have to be enrolled in it. You could be enrolled in it for 2 decades.
No, you couldn't. The license is only valid for 2 years.
And right, we're going to catch that person who's only been there, who's been enrolled for, you know,
We are, because they
Yeah.
have to come back to us.
necessarily. You think that
The same way we know that a person's level 2 license is expired, or a level 1 license can't upgrade to a level 2, it'd be the same thing that we
and
do now.
In
but
here?
okay, I guess I'm just somewhat cynical about that ever
Fair enough.
being cut off, because the person that the district that needed them 3 years ago is probably going to need them today, and if they don't get around to it.
They would have to go to LEA specific in order to do that.
I have a question.
Okay,
That brought up a question in my mind, because during your 10-minute little history thing that you gave us, no, I appreciate it, because most of us weren't on the board during those times. You mentioned that a law was changed, I can't remember what year, I didn't write it down, that said you didn't even have to have a bachelor's degree. Did you mention if that was taken out?
So that statute, that was a bill that was proposed.
Oh, and it didn't pass?
It was,
Okay, thank you.
the superintendent negotiated that, hey, don't pass that bill and we'll create this expanded eminence
Okay,
thing.
thank
to
you.
solve the problem.
That just brought up that question in my mind. Did anyone else have any comments, or
I
did you
had
want to
one
make a
more
proposal?
question.
Yes, please. Go
I
ahead.
had 2 or 3, maybe
Well,
I
hold on
had-
really quick. Did you have a question regarding
It was
this?
it was in regards to this. I think the intent is there to, and there is a limitation on years. And so I just can't, and maybe, I mean, hypothetically, I guess it could happen that someone goes to school for 2 weeks and then withdraws and takes the money, and, do you know what I'm saying? I just don't see that. That is a rare exception. Suppose it could happen, but it is a rare exception. It seems as if we built that framework in there so that for the benefit of helping someone get through or finish up. And it seems like the intent is to help them at the end finish up and to, so I don't want to, I would hate to keep putting more restrictions to the point where we've got so many hoops to jump through again that we haven't eliminated any barriers. And that was, I believe, the intent in the first place, is to create a consistent framework. So anyways, that's just my comment.
Okay, before we start to a new topic, Carol.
I just had one more.
Well, hold on, before we start a new one, let me
No,
just go to Brittany Cummins, because I think it is in regards to what you were already talking about.
Chair, I just wanted to clarify,
And my light's not on.
Board Member Earl, are we talking about line 98 and through 100 still, current enrollment? Because student teachers they're usually not paid. An intern may receive a partial payment, but there's no income available or no money or no incentive. It's basically just giving them permission to be in the classroom that shows that I have met these basic standards and therefore I have permission to be in the classroom. Under the associates, which is used to be called a student teaching license, but now we're hypothetically calling it an associate license.
Okay.
I don't even think they should be included.
Board Member Lear, did you want to go on to your next one?
I wanted to say one more thing about that, and then I can move seamlessly to my next.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
I just wanted to say on the record, I think they should have a bachelor's degree or be solidly into a program. I think this is, I guess I'm persuaded, or my arm is twisted to say, I guess this is needed in some remote places, but I think it is. I'm not worried about people unenrolling and taking the money. I'm worried about somebody getting into a program that for purposes of qualifying for this and staying on that program for as long as they are able to. That's what worries me. And never finishing it, never being fully qualified to be a teacher. That's my concern, and I keep that concern in my heart and mind.
Go ahead.
I can respond from a district's perspective. Having been at a school district, we receive letters from, those districts receive letters from Travis's office saying this teacher has been on their, it was student teaching or temporary license for 2 years, and you'll no longer be eligible for funding if you continue to employ this teacher in that position. And then they would have to go to an LEA license, yes. But Travis has been very good in the past, in my experience representing a district, at making sure that they are told on a timely basis that those teachers have reached the end of the amount of years that they have been allowed. So that's just my experience with how he's operated in the past.
Thank you.
I just had one more question that
Go ahead.
Has nothing to do with this. I'm looking on line 90 for the educator ethics review. I wonder if we've made any progress with that ethics review that's pretty meaningless. Have we done anything about that or made any progress along those lines? We're still using the same one that now is no longer tied to the standards?
I don't know who wants to answer.
We do still use the same one. We did initially do an RFI to get some information on what kind of ethics reviews were out there, but we haven't done much since that time.
I would just hope that we could, as part of this really important revamp, I think we should come up with some kind of ethics review that is meaningful and call it an ethics exam like other professions, and people don't pass it, they don't get their license. Just a comment for the record.
One thing we talked about at some point, and maybe this is a discussion for the next fiscal year priorities, is whether we wanted to try and get some funding to either contract with a service provider. That's why we actually did the RFI at one point, was to see what was out there and see what we could find out as far as cost for a system or a consultant to come in and help us revamp that. So that could be something that, as the board, if you saw that as a fiscal priority, we could potentially see if we could get some money for that project.
Thanks for the explanation.
Okay. Did you have any other questions?
I don't.
Okay, I'll be looking for a motion.
I have one more question.
Oh, go ahead, Board Member Davis.
I'm just quickly reviewing this LEA specific license again. Are there, I know that after 3 years they come back and check with us to have that LEA specific license extended or approved. And I should have asked you this earlier, but are there any other parameters, like we're saying only to be used in rural schools, or by, I mean, I guess my question is, what would stop, say, any school or district from saying, well, we don't like the teeth in this rule, so we're just going to go to all LEA-specific licenses?
Go ahead.
I can somewhat answer that question. As we went through the process with both the task force and the drafting of this particular rule, there were times we went through provisions that would say, you know, you could only have this percentage of teachers on this license, or, you know, putting those kind of limits in place. And ultimately, the language that was landed on is what's been in front of you, in that there's very little restriction in that way other than public notification. You know, making sure that parents are aware that the LEA has to approve these licenses in an open and public meeting. It's not just like the superintendent or the charter director saying, I want this person to have a license. They're voting on it in a public meeting, and then moving from there. Now, I have been told by some board members that they would like to monitor the usage of this license, and if it starts to trend to what you're describing, that maybe we need to look at it more closely. But it also was seen as, again, there's always somebody outside of the rules. So whenever we put boundaries on it, there's going to be somebody on the other side that has ended up with us tinkering this for so long. That was the rationale.
Board Member Davis, follow up.
I'm 100% comfortable monitoring it and just seeing how it progresses. And if it's, you know, used prudently, then let's just keep marching forward. If not, then maybe we need to go back and review again.
I have been advised by the charter school board staff that as charter schools, you know, whenever they come to amend their charter or look at things like that, that this would be something that they would be looking at when they were proposing to change their charter. I've been advised of that.
Thank you. Board Member Earl?
Just two things, and maybe to comment to what Cindy had said, but I actually called my districts up in my area just to say, can you tell me what you're doing, what your processes are, so it wasn't just us talking here. And their comment overall, as a matter of fact, that's what I heard, was we would take a licensed teacher any day over someone that we've got to pull in. And usually they're saying we're doing the LEAs at the last minute. It's not like we're out searching for, hey, Bob down the road, he does a great job at, you know, tutoring math kids after school or something like that. That's not the case. They want a licensed teacher in the classroom. And so, and now I don't know if that'll trend one way or the other, but from the districts I've spoken with, that is what they look for. And then when they get to the point where they have classrooms that need teachers, then they're looking for something more because they just can't fill it. And then I do have a question. So do we have research anywhere that shows LEA licenses, all of our different licenses, and then the success rates of the teachers or their evaluations?
Make their test scores.
So we've done
we want teacher evaluation from the inside.
We've done some exploration of that information as part of the Equity Lab work that we participated in January when we went out and worked with some districts. We had explored to determine. Unfortunately, the evaluation data is too inconsistent to draw any conclusions.
Okay, because I think that would be an interesting look, is to say where are our successful teachers coming from, and that's not, you know, where are they coming from? Are they sticking around? How long they're here? I know that's part of that teacher survey that we want to do, but anyways, that to me that would be an interesting thing. You know, where they're coming, how successful they are, that kind of thing.
Board Member Davis.
Just one follow-up to your comment. What you said exactly mirrors what our district is doing as well. But that is under the old system where we have been monitoring compliance through an ARL, classes. We are suggesting making a shift from monitoring compliance to monitoring competence. And those are two different things. So I'm just thinking hypothetically, there may be different domino effects than we think it will need to, I think, monitor maybe in a different way than what a compliance program would require. So.
Okay. Board Member Cummins.
So when we're talking about monitoring the system, when we first talked about it, it was basically monitoring numbers. Do we have a huge number of LEA-specific licenses popping up in certain areas? Because otherwise, are we monitoring effectiveness and teachers and et cetera? Right. And what does that look like? And what is it we're really looking for. And so when we first talked about monitoring, I think it was just basically just recognizing, is this becoming a hot, bubbling up into something bigger than we anticipated, just in numbers, not necessarily effectiveness or finding ways to define that.
Well, and that, for me, opens up a giant philosophical debate. What does it mean to be an effective teacher? Because we're going to have completely different viewpoints on what that looks like. Some people, it is about the test. Some people, it's about the personal relationships with the child. And that's a big discussion. So, yeah. So it's something I guess we just have to kind of look at the road. But there'll be a big philosophical debate about that. What effective means. Yeah, and I probably don't necessarily agree, but.
Well,
I'm saying we do have a definition.
Yeah.
all of us are unhappy to some extent, so that must be good. I have one more question.
Okay, go ahead, please. Sorry.
I just want to, again, making sure I understand, and sorry it took poring over this to really ask these questions, but on line 65, it talks about an educator license shall include at least one area of concentration, and then it says license areas of concentration and endorsements shall have a designation of. So my understanding now, not only licenses will be designated associate, professional, or LEA specific, but also endorsements and areas of concentration? And will that literally be on Cactus or the new Cactus?
That's the intent, yes. The intent is to say that I may have a professional license as a secondary math teacher, but if I want to learn how to be a school counselor, at the same time, I need to be able to have an associate school counselor license area. Or if I'm a professional secondary math, I need to be an associate physics, like SAEPs in the current system, those.
So that is the intent?
That is the intent.
And you really do intend to keep track of those or designate those like that?
That's why I want a new Cactus, yes.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. I just wanted to understand.
Thank you. Board Member Earl?
Just, I guess, and we're shifting education to competency-based, so maybe there's this philosophical thing out there, indeed, you know what I mean, where versus the compliance element. Anyways, we won't go into that, but I would like to make a motion to approve, let's see if I can do this right, R277-301 is the whole thing, right?
As amended.
As amended. What's the rest of it that I need to?
On first draft.
On first draft to go to the board.
Sorry, draft one on first reading.
I should go back instead of.
Draft one as amended? Sorry.
Hold on.
Yeah, it is.
That's all right. It's not your motion. It's
I know. Hang on. Let me just get to the actual thing
verily
here.
yay stuff.
Okay.
All right. My motion is to approve R277-301 Educator Licensing Amendment 1. Draft 1 as amended. I'm still going to get this wrong. On first reading.
We got the intent,
And recommend
right?
to the full board.
On second and final.
On second and final reading. Okay.
Thank you. So the motion on the table is to approve R277-301, Draft 1, as amended on first reading and recommend to the board on second and final reading. Any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll move on to item 1.2, R277-303, and these are also my amendments so that it mirrors 301 on 82, where we're just looking for and approved by the board, and it's the same pedagogical assessment standards. But then I also am recommending an appeal process so that if the superintendent doesn't approve an application from an educator preparation program, they have at least some way to appeal, just to look and see if there's a reason why. So that's lines 85 through 89 if you want to take a look at those.
I forgot I had two questions on that.
Board Member Lear.
Two questions on this. On page 2, the line, first of all, the superintendent may place an approved educator program preparation program on probation for, and then there's an A and B. Is that meant to be only, those are the only reason that she can put that program on probation, or is that, are those two reasons of many, or I just didn't know if there should be an only in there.
I'm sorry, are you on line 30 and 31, those
No,
A and B?
line 42.
Oh, 42, thank you. I see. Does anyone have an answer for her? Travis, go ahead.
This one is actually, I don't know how much you really want to know about this.
Just give me the short version.
Short version. Previously, there was question by a particular university that was placed on probation on whether or not the superintendent had the ability to put them on probation for that reason. And so the language was revised to be this. So this is actually what's currently in the rule.
Okay.
We feel it's sufficient, but theoretically, yes, there might be things outside of the realm that we haven't thought of.
But you're saying that you're reading that only into it, then?
That's how we interpret it, was that these are the only reasons the superintendent could place
A program
on probation.
Go ahead. Ben.
Yeah, I've got a couple of changes when it's appropriate that the assistant AGs are recommending that we make to the rule.
Okay. Let me let Board Member Lear finish.
Just one more thought that's similar, that something might, the thought that's maybe not finished. On line 47, the board may revoke the approval of probation or program fails to meet with at least 1 year's notice to whom? To the sponsoring entity, to all enrolled students, to?
The intention was with notice to the program itself.
Okay.
But that is unclear.
Okay. I think that it would help if it were just, I'm not a fan of intent, is what I'm trying to say.
I get you.
I'm a fan of words. Yeah. To the sponsoring entity, which would be, because it could also be an LEA now who's...
Theoretically, yes. Yes.
To the sponsoring entities would be how I would propose to amend that.
Do you want to make an amendment?
Yes.
So on line 48, you want to add
to the sponsor,
with at least 1 year's notice to the sponsoring entity?
Yeah. Or would it be the educator prep program?
Well, I think it's defined because it's not, somewhere I got a line, or the language of a sponsoring entity. But maybe.
Because it could be the
education preparation program.
Right?
Yeah, it looks like
so under the definitions, if you go up to line 17, it defines educator preparation program, 14 to 14.
Let's do to the education preparation program.
Okay.
Somewhere I got that.
Okay. So there's a proposed amendment on the table to add on line 48 at the end of notice to the education preparation program. Any discussion to that proposed amendment? See.
Do you want it to be educator or education?
Whatever the
What is the definition?
Educator.
Educator.
Yep.
Thank you for catching that. Educator preparation program. Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That amendment passes unanimously. Okay,
Thanks, those were my questions.
thank you. And then we'll turn the time to Ben.
So on line 85, Assistant AG Questenberry has recommended that in lieu of, 86, instead of putting if the superintendent does not approve, he recommends that we put if the superintendent denies.
Okay,
If that's
so on lane 85,
a little more concise. That's on line 86 now, but yes.
oh, my sheet says, okay. I will make a motion that we approve an amendment to lines 85 through 89, changing does not approve to denies, and as written. Does that work? Any discussion to that? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? that amendment passes, and I'd also like to, go ahead.
I have one
I was just
more
going to make a motion
as well.
to approve the draft.
Yes.
And also, this may be very technical, but in light of trying to keep our terms very consistent, I would also recommend that we amend line 86 to say the proposed educator preparation program. So
Okay.
just insert educator preparation program right there after proposed and before program.
Okay. Board Member Davis, did you want to,
Well,
was
that kind
it?
of goes with your motion, right? That kind of goes along with what you
Okay,
just
well,
said.
we just
Or do
passed
we
that,
need
so we're
to-
going to have to do another amendment to what we just passed.
Do you want to do that first, and then I'll
Kind of a
move to
nonsense
do
amendment.
the
Okay,
draft?
so I'll propose an amendment to line 86 to add educator preparation between proposed and program. Any discussion to that amendment? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Go ahead,
move
Board Member
this?
Davis.
There's no other.
I can go once you're done.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to move to approve the
Oh,
draft.
yeah.
Oh, no, I have another one still, and
Oh.
he has some.
Okay, then never
So
mind.
the other recommendation we have from Assistant AG Buse is on line, after line 10. I'm going to suggest this a little bit differently, Michelle, that we add subsection D, section 53E6302, which requires the board to establish standards for approval of educator preparation programs. So it would just be adding one more statute which authorizes the board to enact the rule.
Okay. And you have that written down how you want it?
Yeah, I can spell it out here.
I'm going to add that amendment with the amendment to line 82 to speed things up. So line 82, it just mirrors the language from 301 that says and approved by the board. And this is talking about the pedagogical assessment standards. So my amendment, sorry, go ahead.
So wouldn't all the underlying
So,
come through if we just did draft one, we approved draft one?
yeah,
As amendment.
84 is already
Okay.
in the draft. Or 82, well,
Oh,
82.
okay. That's not the same version.
I've thrown the numbering off by making some edits.
Yeah, it's fine. It's just different line numbers.
I'm editing the document.
I think we approved it in the last meeting.
Yeah, his
Your
is
amendment.
84. Okay, so we'll say as amended. Okay, perfect. Okay, then
So now
you can
go.
go ahead and do it.
All right. I move that we approve R277-303-1, draft 1, as amended and
On first
on
reading.
first reading, and send it to the full board on second reading,
Second and final.
second and final reading.
Okay, the motion on the table is to approve R277-303, Draft 1, as amended on first reading and recommend to the board on second and final reading. Any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously with Board Member Lear absent. Okay, now we will get to 1.3, which is why the bulk of everybody's here. So, pedagogical performance assessment standards. These are in board docs. Do you want to come up, please, and introduce yourself?
Thank you. Diana Sudworth, Director of Teaching and Learning here at the USBE for a few more days. So thank you for having an extra board meeting, because I thought I had
Yay,
attended
thank
my last, and I was wrong. So what you have, what you have before you in board docs are the standards for the pedagogical assessment that are proposed, that even though the board rules that you just passed haven't gone through the full board, we would still like you to approve these, or a form of these moving forward. We've given you the background at previous meetings. We've involved a lot of stakeholders in writing these, and we see these as one of the fundamental pieces to the passage from an associate to a professional license. I did want to let you know that after the meeting last week, or 2 weeks, the last board meeting, which I did not attend but did watch on video, which was very exciting, almost as exciting as being in the room with the health standards. I was able to take advantage of the Utah Council of Education Dean's meeting, which was last week, where we discussed the proposals again. And so what you have before you as a draft to accept, first off, in the second paragraph, we've gone ahead and made the changes that you did approve. You did vote on these as an amendment, so we did just put that in as a part of the second paragraph. But your meeting didn't quite settle on some wording for Part E. So if you'll look at Part E, there are three choices, if you will, before you. The first choice, utilize assessors who are external to the preparation program and who do not know the candidate, was the original wording. I do want to say that we always thought that this wording would include universities coming up that could come up with their own programs, but we thought, and staff still thinks, that an external evaluation of some kind is important. The second proposal is what was put before you at the board meeting: implement a system of blind verification of a random sample of candidate results to calibrate and verify the integrity of initial scoring, ensuring inter-rater reliability and fidelity of implementation, or utilize assessors who are external to the preparation program. We thought that in listening to you, you wanted the order flipped on that, so the end of that sentence really is the first choice, but then to flip it to make sure that it was clear that there was that kind of flexibility. In discussing it with the deans last week, we came up with a third alternative that we thought has the flexibility of the second choice, and actually perhaps a little bit more flexibility than the second choice. Because there may be other ways of validating a program other than this double-blind system. So the proposal was include a process for externally established and maintained inter-rater reliability, or utilize assessors who are external to the preparation program. I wish I could say that the deans unanimously supported this, but that would not be true. Weber University still really wants it to be even more clear that they can do basically what they're doing now. And so they were not opposed to this language, but reticent about the language. SUU, their stance is that they don't want a pedagogical performance at all, that they would like universities to be exempt from that. BYU was not in the room last week, but in general they would agree with SUU. UVU, USU, University of Utah, I'm forgetting one.
Western Governors, Westminster.
Well, Western Governors and Westminster weren't there, so I only want to represent those that were there, but UVU, USU, and Dixie, thank you, Dixie was the other one. They were all very supportive of this new language, seeing
Which one? Number
three, because they thought that gave that was sort of that middle ground that gave them the ability to move forward with developing their own if they wanted to, but also they, in general, those universities are still thinking an external evaluation is pretty important, and those four also would be fine with choice 1, but they also were okay with choice 3.
I have a question. What does it look like to not have E at all?
Well, it would still, if we didn't have E at all, and that is something that we did discuss ourselves, if we didn't have E at all, then you would be leaving more to interpretation in terms of what validity and reliability would entail. So it could still end up, that could still be a part of the evaluation, but it wouldn't have to be a part of the evaluation. So that could be a fourth option, is to just strike it entirely.
Okay, I know that's some feedback I've gotten, and then you said that's what SUU basically was saying, they don't want that either.
SUU actually doesn't want a pedagogical performance assessment at all.
So they didn't have anything about this particular point.
And I'm from SUU, so just...
Oh, thank you. We'll get to public...
It's not about assessment, it's just more that we have assessments throughout our whole program that we think are, if you add them up, are equivalent to a pedagogical assessment. So it's not like we're anti-assessment.
Okay. Thank you. Was there any other comments? Board member?
Earl, sorry.
Turn it right.
So
I know you.
I've thought a lot about this over the last several months, and I have a little different perspective that I want to ask about, just because I'm wondering, when we talk about validity, we want to make sure that what's going on within the setting is measuring what we want it to measure, right? So do our universities, and maybe those that you represent can speak if you speak during public comment, do our universities or do the districts that the students, well, not students anymore, the teachers go to, is there a communication back and forth between them? In other words, if there were 50 graduates from University of Utah that went into the Salt Lake School District to teach, at year one, is there an ability to give feedback and say, you know what worked for us during our university time, or what we needed that you didn't provide us with? Is there currently any of that feedback? Because to me, when you're asking an outside entity to come in and give you feedback on how effective you are versus the real life, what's really happening in schools, it's a different, you get different information. So I'm just asking, is there something like that going on, or are the universities reaching out to those districts?
I think it's more the latter. We don't have a systematized way that we're getting that, but in listening to the deans talk about their relationships with the districts that they typically use, they're certainly involved in a process of continuous improvement of their programs, and so those discussions definitely happen.
So to me, that would be more valuable information than, I don't know, I guess I have concerns about the outside measurement tool. Anyways, but regardless, I want them still to be able to choose what works for them and what the professionals are deciding they want to do. But I think that more direct dialogue would have more value from the students that are actually leaving, even from the LEAs. Which ones are successful? Are we not having successful students coming in? And if so, what does the program need to change to make that successful? More so than our list of, you do this, this, and this, which is great. These are overall ideas, but at the same time, if there's certain things that we're not meeting, anyways, that's probably too much information. But
sorry, I'll get to public comment in just a minute. If you can hold that thought so I can get to the...
Oh, I didn't...
Okay, so Board Member Cummins, and then we'll open it up to public comment.
Is it okay if I clarify or ask a question of Board Member Earl? Were you asking about information back to the program based on their program? Because this is pedagogical assessment doesn't assess the university program. It assesses each individual candidate. And so it allows, so the external eyes are basically, so instead of I'm the teacher and I've been working with the student all along, the validity comes is, am I assessing this person accurately? If I'm their teacher, where is that external look that says, yes, this candidate has accomplished what these standards have been established. So it's not assessing the program, it's actually very individualized to each individual candidate.
Yeah, I understand that, but really, in the end, we want certain teachers. We want teachers that can accomplish certain things, right? I mean, that's why they're taking that's why they're going through the programs in the first place, is so they can be successful at teaching kids. And so, yes, you're right, that is a measurement of that individual student knowing the information in the program. But in the end, we want to make sure that the students, I said kids, but the students that are coming out are actually highly successful teachers. And so that, I'm just wondering about the feedback coming back from the districts to the programs themselves. So,
go ahead, Travis.
I think it's one thing that I keep hearing from the last few months as we've discussed this, and it's been a really good discussion. And I think it's important to remember that what you're describing is a part of being a good program, getting feedback from your candidates, from the people who hire your candidates. That's part of getting feedback on a program. And a lot of the assessments, the things like what Dean Christensen is talking about, these standards don't prevent them from doing those things. It's what Board Member Cummins said. It's the independent verification, and so we have to be careful about what we're talking about, because a lot of these things will continue. When if you go back to January when this kind of surprised everybody, Are we talking about getting rid of student teaching evaluation? No, that's not what we're talking about. That would still occur. So it's important to remember that this is one piece of the puzzle. The universities will be doing assessments and things along the way as well. This is just another piece of a larger puzzle. That's the only comment I wanted to make.
Board member comments?
Travis, is there anything in these standards that would prevent a university from using some of the current assessment models that they're using to build their overall pedagogical assessment?
I don't think so. I don't think their current methodologies would meet these standards as they are currently being implemented, but I think there would be ways for them to change and to improve those processes to meet these standards, or whichever one they want to do. Yeah.
Diana?
So I just wanted to add to that the standards, remember, were written by a group of university professors, and some of the professors that were at the table had that idea in mind. So when Travis said, I don't believe so, the intent in writing the standards was to leave that door open.
Okay. Thank you. Board member Lear?
I had one just grammatical change that's been bugging me since I read these the first time. But then I would like to hear the audience before I have other comments.
Yes, so I would like to move to public comment before we do any type of amendments.
Can I just tell my grammatical?
Yeah, you can tell it.
So it'll stop bugging me?
Yeah.
On number 4, Travis.
Yeah.
The pedagogical performance assessment must require the candidate to document
his or her.
Don't do his own, but just do his own.
Yep.
And it's also in the next line, too.
Got it.
Oh, I just hate that universal
I remember that.
pronoun.
I remember.
Thank you.
Oh, paragraph 4, not number 4.
Yeah, he got it. That's fine.
We can take care of that.
Thank you. Okay, we'll open it up to public comment if you two don't mind letting that. And so I'm going to go through first who's on my list, and then I know people have walked in that may want to give public comment. And when you come to the mic, if you'll just introduce yourself and what entity you represent, if any. I'm going to start with Nancy Peterson, if she's here.
Maybe we come together.
Sure. I'm guessing you're Nancy and Ann?
Yes.
Thank you.
So also, we have a handout. May
Would
we
it be
have permission
appropriate,
to?
just our speaking points?
Yes,
to
that's
keep
fine.
us
And I will, do you think 5 minutes is good? We have a while.
We can do that.
We
Yeah,
have
thank
worked
you.
hard to be less than.
Thank you.
Let's see, I push this, okay?
Yeah, so the red light needs to be on.
Okay. I'm Nancy Peterson, professor at UVU School of Education. My doctorate is in curriculum instruction from the University of Virginia.
And I am Ann Sharp. I am an associate professor at UVU. I am a doctorate in educational psychology with an emphasis on reading science. And I got my degree at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas.
Thank you.
We have listened to a couple of the proceedings previous to this meeting, and we understand the concerns that have been expressed, the ones that we listened to, and we in fact shared them at the beginning of our journey, but we've done a turnaround and we'd like to share that with you.
Thank you.
So,
Well, we've heard the Edtpa called, quote, a burden placed on students that interferes with their learning. But we want to let you know that it has had an extremely positive effect on the learning of our students. We're going on our 4th year doing this.
So Edtpa, that's an acronym that stands for Educative Teacher Performance Assessment. And the word educative is what sold me on this process of assessment, because it is very educative to both the student and to us.
It requires a teacher candidate to plan and reflect on the planning, then to teach, create a video of their teaching and reflect on that, then to assess appropriately aligned with everything and assess on that. It's everything that we set out to study when we went into teacher education, but it's all wrapped up in a a very authentic assessment based in a real classroom with real children.
So at TPA, it allows mentors to guide teacher candidates to their best performance. It uses handbooks, complex but very clear rubrics, and templates on which teacher candidates must take a very honest look at themselves as teachers, at their practices, at the answers that at the questions that they have, and answering some of those questions themselves as they deal with real children in a real classroom.
Everything in the assessment draws on multiple perspectives. It doesn't go against anything that I learned about at the University of Virginia. In fact, it supports everything that I've always understood. It supports the plans that we had originally. This is my 22nd year at UVU. We've been through a lot of our own assessments, and this tops it.
It actually helps students connect the dots. So rather than taking away from the program that we have spent so much time giving them, they start saying, oh my gosh, now I understand how what I learned in multicultural really applies in the classroom. Oh, now I really get differentiation and why it needs to be student-centered. They start connecting all the dots from the different professors that they've had through our program and start valuing their education and realizing that what they are learning is really going to help them be effective in the classroom.
An example to me right away is a student that we have all been concerned about on our faculty. No one wanted to break the news that we didn't think she was cut out to be a teacher. Upon completing her Edtpa, she came to us and said, I've looked at my video and I can't find evidence anywhere that I've given them a chance to practice what I taught. What do I do? What am I going to say? And we've talked through that. We could not have taught her that principle any more powerfully than the way she learned it. We love how the Edtpa respects this profession. Through 18 rubrics in the elementary program, it just combines everything that we believe teachers need to have. Not as many rubrics for the secondary, but all the areas that it can assess, special ed, all of the areas in secondary under things that have been found to be valid and
reliable,
right, without us having to do that research.
So I wanted to tell you a little bit about that process. It's really quite remarkable. We have met with some of those who are involved in this very diligent and rigorous work of proving Edtpa's statistical and validity and reliability. More than 1,000 educators from every level, including school teachers, including faculty members at university levels, including administrators at district levels, from 29 states. And 400 institutions participated in an extensive multi-year development process, including pilots and field tests with thousands of candidates.
It's now being used by more than 800 institutions across 41 states, and we're so proud to be part of that. Neither of us are early in our careers, and when we were first charged to become mentors to our students, we thought maybe they were trying to get rid of us. But we're on call right now with, between us, about 55 students because they have a deadline coming up. And we know they're going to know what teachers need to do. They're going to know what has to happen in real classrooms. They're going to put students at the center of their teaching.
We have some videos of some of those students talking about their Edtpa experience, and it's very telling as they stand with confidence and share what they've learned, the process they've gone through. I received a thank you note saying that, yeah, I had my share of tears, but now I'm really grateful that I went through this because I really feel like I know what a quality teacher is going to be like and how I can obtain that. We find that empowering and exciting as they see the value of it.
As I mentioned, we're entering our 4th year, and every semester we agree that our teachers have changed. Our teachers have become true teachers of this profession, and we have changed too.
That's true. I wanted to say one more thing. So with our state's documented slump in children's reading achievement, which is reflected really across the nation, it is very exciting to me that Edtpa recognizes and supports the indisputable research that it's really teachers that make the difference. So we believe in Edtpa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions for us?
Go ahead.
I do. I wanted to say, can I ask these doctors a question? I'm very impressed. This is very helpful. And I really appreciate your taking the time to provide your personal information about this, your personal experience. My question is, the thing that I have wrestled with since I heard about this, and people like you are increasingly convincing me that something like this, if it's not exactly Edtpa, but something is a good thing. But I have 2 questions, actually. I'll ask maybe the easier one first, and that is, does it trouble you that these students who are already in a 4 to 5 year program have to pay this much extra? Is it by any means built into their tuition, or do they have to literally pay it out of pocket? And does that trouble you? How do you feel about that? That's one of the things that just
It is built into their
grates on me.
fees, and I thought it would be a big deal, but no one has said anything about that to me. They are so proud when they get their scores. They're so proud when they have finished their portfolio. I don't know, maybe they have more money than I did as a student, but I have not heard complaints about that.
I think a lot of times they take it very much like any other thing. This is just another requirement that I have to take. I don't think anybody likes giving another $300 to doing this, but
Some vendor.
yeah. But I think that when they do see the educative part of it and they realize the benefits that come back to them, as well as the opportunity to get their license, then
Which they only see once they've completed it.
Yeah.
It doesn't look very pretty at the beginning.
yeah.
Yeah, and then just another, and what would you think about the possibility, just again in the spirit of discussion, making something either Edtpa specifically or something like that optional for a student who's been through the university program but required for the teacher who's 2 days into a university program? I mean, who has been non-traditionally prepared. What would you think about making it optional for the one group and making it required for a person in the alternative program? What would you think about that? And I know I'm hitting you cold with that, but
Well, in the spirit of discussion, right?
Sure.
I would see it as very problematic because there's so many stakeholders that become involved, and it's just helpful to have everybody on the same page, all dealing with the same issues, and understanding both the benefits and the drawbacks, and trying to make solutions together. So if you have some people doing it this way and some people doing it that way, I think it would become problematic.
If they approached it through being so aware of every word of every rubric, every part of the program, one of the things that has frustrated us is hearing comments of people who we know haven't read it because they've said things that are not consistent with our experience, having read the rubrics, having read knowing what every single step of it has entailed. If an LEA were to approach it that carefully, that diligently, rigorously, perhaps it could work. Possibly more an agreement between between
And I was
a
really,
university or...
and if I can, I was more thinking optional for the university-prepared students
Oh.
because they've had a rigorous, constantly evaluative process versus the person who just walks into a district to fill a necessary spot.
Having been a part of those processes, I do not believe they could match the rigor of this assessment.
We'd have to assign. I mean,
I don't believe UVU could have and proven the validity in.
okay. Thank
Yeah.
you for being really honest with me.
You're
That's
welcome.
helpful. Thanks.
Board Member Earl.
Thank you, and thank you for coming. Appreciate all the information. You went through a lot of work to put this together and for presenting to us. So I'm kind of back to my previous thoughts or whatever. What kind of dialogue are you carrying on with districts or follow-up after a year, after 2 years to know the outcome of these students that you've had?
I know that we're having dialogue with them as they're doing it because they go into their classrooms and the cooperating teachers have to be prepared for what is being expected. So I know that
The
that is
Edtpa,
the
right?
Edtpa, right. I don't know, Stan Vesla, can you address that?
Sorry, I need you to come to the mic for the record. And then introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. Vesela Ilieva, Interim Dean in the School of Education at UVU. To respond to your question specifically, we do have a survey that we conduct after our students had been in the field 1 year into their professional experience. We have this survey with both our students who are at this point alumni, and we also survey their principals of the schools where they have been hired. As with any survey, there is a variation in the response rate that we receive. I think we have been successful in moving to an electronic form and increasing those response rates. So these inform our program improvement decision making, and we really are part of our annual evaluation and data analysis that we perform in the school.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all for coming. I'm going to go on to Stan Harward. Is it an A or an O?
Harvard.
Harward, thank you.
Thank you. Stan Harward, I'm Associate Dean of the School of Education from Utah Valley University. I have to apologize. I had a crown fall out about 10 minutes before I came here.
I'm sorry.
So I've got to get to the dentist to have that. So if I talk funny or look funny, you'll know why.
We can't help.
I'm sure it's going to take away a little bit of my credibility to have missing teeth. So I wanted to speak on something. I listened to the last meeting that you had that was online, and there were a couple of things that that I wanted to talk about with that. And one is, and I feel I'm uniquely qualified to speak about this. I've been in education for over 40 years. I've worked in the public school system as a teacher and a principal of several schools, and a district level director over curriculum and literacy K-12, helped develop, I think, really great professional development program in that district. And then I've been at the university for several years and helped develop the university program. So I wanted to speak to you about I'm concerned about the idea that an LEA can become a teacher preparation program. That just really concerns me based on my experience. And I have been in both. I've been in the district for many years. I've been at a university for many years, and I've been head of these two things. I've helped develop both programs. So in the district, they have I just can't tell you how great those people are there, how knowledgeable they are. When I was working there as a director over all of the K-12 literacy and language arts, we had a small group that would work with me as a staff that were just amazing. Their knowledge level, what they could perform and what they could do. We had coaches in every school that we would bring in every week, so all of our professional development with all of the teachers across the district then were followed up by coaching, so we had really a good professional development program. When I went to the university and helped with UVU for many years, helped develop that program over time into what it is today, one of the largest teacher preparation programs in the state. And I watched if you think of this for just a minute, we hire people in a national search from all over the nation. They're at the top of their ability. They all have doctorate degrees in their area. You build a cohesive program where they work together. It is nationally accredited, which I don't know if anybody here has ever gone through that, but you can imagine the work it takes to become nationally accredited. To think that an LEA can be a teacher preparation provider and pass that kind of muster until they hire nationally, competitively across the nation, people with doctorate degrees, until they become nationally accredited, they're designed for a different purpose. And it just personally scares me for the profession that we would think that an LEA that's, we'll just, this PTA president wants to be a teacher, or this aide wants to, so we'll put them in schools, we'll give them a clinical program, they'll work with teachers and principals, we'll have our professional development people work with them. Maybe they take a couple of classes at the university, and now we certify them and give them a professional level license so they can go anywhere and teach. I think we're tricking ourselves to think that there's a huge difference between university level preparation program. I'm talking about Utah State and Utah and Weber, SUU, UVU. These are amazing programs. I'm just kind of blown away because I see that from the inside, and I see both of them. There's a big difference in the two. I would recommend that if you do something, I'm even concerned about the idea of some of the universities getting together as a consortium, now BYU and Weber State if they get together, and Westminster, they may have the resources and the expertise to create quite a viable program, but it will be for their programs based on their student experience and unique to their experience. I heard in the last meeting people say, well, can the LEAs just purchase your program? And that I would recommend that you go with an Edtpa or a PPAT, because that's 25 years of work and development, valid, reliable. If you want to make sure, and I believe the Board of Education's primary responsibility is to develop and to assure that there's quality education taking place across and so whoever comes into that profession, there needs to be some kind of and you give them a professional level license, there needs to be some bar that they pass, that they show that they're able to do that. If they go into any other field, medical or dental or nursing or engineering, my son is in finance and he's having to pass extremely rigorous tests to get these certifications to say he can do this. So I probably talked long enough, but anyway, those are some things I would hope that the Board of Education would consider in this whole issue.
Thank you.
I have a question for...
Yeah, it's fine. We just have to be cognizant of time.
Okay. Just a short question for Dr. Harwood. I completely 115% philosophically agree with you, but in 30 seconds, what would be your response to a very rural district that says we don't have a teacher here that is licensed, credentialed the way she should be. What would you rather have? No one in front of that choir class? If you can give me a viable alternative, I will jump on it.
Well, Edtpa has for music education, there's assessments for those. So I would, are you thinking they don't have anything? They're just off the street coming in teaching?
They just have to enroll in your program for 2 days, and that person can walk into a school district. That's to be hired. The school district has to feel good about it. The charter school has to feel good about it. But I'm just saying is, if there is an alternative to filling those positions for which there are not enough teachers, I would love that idea.
I don't know if I have an answer for that, but I just know that if you don't want to water down education, there needs to be some kind of standard that just anybody can't do it. Now there are people that are kind of naturally talented, but I watch our students when they come in, and you go up to Utah State University and watch this, or any university, when they first come in and when they leave, and they're just totally different. 2.5 years of rigorous hard work, spending thousands of dollars, having experiences in school, carefully being watched and monitored. There's a huge difference.
Right.
So I'm sorry I don't have answers. But those are the issues that you have to deal with.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Is there anyone else from the public that wasn't signed up? Yes, please come up and introduce yourself. And appreciate it. If we have questions for the public, let's just try to make sure that we're not making them feel like they have to come up with solutions for us. But
you mean like I just did?
Well,
I think he was big enough to try. Yes, thank you. Didn't mean to say so. I should have started with that.
Hi, Sean Christiansen, Southern Utah University, Dean of the College of Education and Human Development. So I just want to clarify, we do support assessments and even pedagogical assessments, but I think like Weber State is more the focus on flexibility, and that maybe even a pedagogical assessment can be something that's integrated across the whole curriculum as opposed to something that's more towards the end. So that's the specific point. And kind of the general idea, in terms of some of the board rules, I do support the changes, focus on competency. I think that's allowed a lot more flexibility within our programs. And focus on quality. I agree in terms of having things like a pedagogical assessment, because in the past it's kind of been, here's the standards for traditional universities and here's these other pathways. And my own philosophical thoughts on that is, by doing that, we've undermined the profession of teaching. I went back to get a social work degree and become a licensed clinical social worker. I had a PhD, I had a master's degree, and they didn't care. They made sure I had to go through the whole program, had to get all my hours. There's only one pathway for that license. And I think going through the process of having all these pathways, it basically feeds into the myth that we've heard that anybody can teach. And if anybody can teach, then that means we have to regulate the profession, because we can't treat teachers like professionals. We regulate the profession more, and I know at least from some teachers that drives them out of it, because they can't be the teachers that they want to be without being controlled by these regulations. So I like the direction of the competency-based model in the direction that it's going. However, again, I think there's some, as Stan kind of commented, there's maybe an extra step we can take that gets us more in line with a one pathway. And if you think about LEAs, all of the universities throughout the state are geographically throughout the state. We don't hit all the rural districts, but there are service centers throughout the state that do serve these rural communities. We have 5,000 level credits. Those are can be taught through districts. And I think there's a way we could use the partnerships that most universities have, use professional development to say there is one pathway. We live in a technological world, and we can form partnerships with districts so that, in essence, these LEAs have to follow, in essence, the same things that a traditional program would do. And in essence, even though it's a separate pathway, the standards, expectations of what required would be the same. Because I think the idea of having one pathway with very high expectations adds to the fact that then we can trust teachers, we can treat them like professionals, as opposed to anybody can teach, let's get anybody in the door to teach, and I think then allowing so much flexibility. One of the things, as I really appreciated Travis's history, and a lot of that history, though, you can see, like, let's react to this problem and make this exception. Let's react to this problem and make this exception. And over time, then we get these watered-down standards and expectations, which, again, feeds into, what is the profession of teaching when it is so watered down? So those are some of my thoughts in terms of raising the standards and expectations. One thing I think would be helpful going forward, I sense some frustration here in terms of the board transfer. I know myself as a dean, I felt frustrated in terms of what the legislature does and so forth. It seems like most of the time when we create I know everyone in this room is highly committed to making high-quality education in Utah, and yet it seems like the communication gets fragmented in little pieces, and I think that's maybe when some of the pedagogical assessment went sideways. It's not that people weren't communicating, but they're communicating in their own little silos without the whole system. And I think it would be nice to have, with research-based, evidence-based practice, to say what would be, if we could just look at and kind of blow everything up, what would be high-quality education in Utah, and build a plan around that, and then start making policies directed at that, as opposed to reacting to, my neighbor said this, therefore I need this, or this district said this, so let's react to that. A comprehensive plan that outlines what best practices would be in Utah. And I know some of, that comes down to money, but I think a lot of things don't require money. A lot of things can be done in very simple ways. And I could give you an example from Japan, which I've been to many times. I'm not going to now. It's about school lunch. It doesn't cost them anything, and yet it makes a very profound impact on their education. The last thing in terms of going forward, this is an aside, but as we move forward in looking at directions for education, I think all the universities in Utah do an excellent job of preparing teachers to enter into that first day. But as my example of being in Lions Clinical Social, I couldn't get my license. I got a CSW to start doing therapy, but I had to get 1,000 hours of supervised training to be fully licensed. When a teacher graduates from a program, they're qualified to enter that door, but they're not experienced enough. They're still learning. And I think moving the direction of having mentoring for these students once they translate or transfer into a school, that they're still getting training, they're still getting support. So I think mentoring would be helpful as we move forward, and particularly giving more opportunities for practicing teachers to provide their leadership to these students, so that they see there's more opportunities for growth and development, because I think that's another reason why we're losing teachers, is there's not as many opportunities for growth and development once they enter into the door. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for making that drive, yes.
Hi, Rita Hagren, American Federation of Teachers, Utah. Listening to a lot of this, I'm kind of seeing, as I'm always about, like, how do you fix the problem? I'm seeing that the major concern is not necessarily with Edtpa or the pedagogical assessment, but with the preparation that goes into that to be able to do that. I'm hearing most of the concern being with LEAs not having the expertise to prepare for the students, prepare teachers, okay? That's from UVU and SUU, that's what I'm hearing. I think this might work, that you don't let the LEAs be the teacher preparation, because I know that UEA has mentioned that it's kind of a problem when they're preparing you and they're hiring you. It kind of sets up a conflict. So if we don't let the LEAs be the teacher preparation, but so let's say down in Bluff or somewhere, you have the situation from Board Member Lear that's saying we need a teacher, we need a choir teacher, we need a math teacher, we need a history teacher. But then you get the LEA specific license, okay? But then to get the full license, they have to go through one of the university programs or one of the other entities like that. And I could see, especially some of the rural districts saying, you know what, you want to go through this, preparation program at the proper rigor level, and we can help you with that monetarily. So that might kind of solve all the problems. What do you think? It's an interesting idea.
It's about money. It's about, I think districts.
We need to talk in front of mics. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Well,
All
just
right.
a button.
But, you know, but again, I don't think it's necessarily the EdTPA, you know, the thought that I'm going to have someone teach my daughter with just a video that's 15 minutes, but no other preparation than we know to get to that point. I mean, that's the concern. I think our universities do a fabulous job, and over the years of my career, starting in 1982, I've seen a marked improvement in those programs. So I like what the universities are doing. I'm concerned about the other entities that we want to allow to prepare our teachers. Thanks.
Thank you. Do I have another hand raised? Okay. I'm going to have to start watching the clock because we are running shorter on time and we still have to. Yeah, go ahead. Please introduce yourself.
Parker Fawson. I'm the M. Eccles Jones Endowed Chair of Education and Professor in the School of Teacher Education and Leadership at Utah State University. I'm also the director of the legislatively funded Center for the School of the Future at Utah State University. As I've been listening the last two meetings to the conversations of the board, I want to commend the board from my experience, and by the way, I'm representing my views here, not the university's views. Commend the board for their approach to really rethinking systems that impact learning, and I think this is what drives me, and my motivation is how do we produce effective teachers for the system that actually impact learning. And if you put this in a practical context, you know, when you have 43% of third graders and fewer as you work up through the system that are proficient in literacy, you have 47% in the state of Utah that are proficient in math, about 51% proficient in science. That means on the flip side, there's 57% that are not proficient in literacy and 53% that are not proficient in numeracy, and there are huge consequences to those children as they work through the system. And if I know you know this, but as you dig into what some of the life decisions will be like for these kids going forward, it's pretty sobering. And so the motivation of the state board over the past few years to say, let's rethink licensure, is a systems thinking approach. And let's rethink how we set up rules for clinical practice and practicum experiences for teachers coming into the system. That ties into a system of licensure. And now you're considering, previous board considered how do we ascertain that a teacher is really ready to make an impact on learning, and now you're considering standards to impact what decisions are made around those assessments. I see all of those as tying into this systems approach, system solution approach to how we impact learning, and I think it's the right path to take to make these decisions. We know that high-performing countries and states within the U.S. that are differentially impacting student learning have taken this same pathway where they're looking at what does the system do to impact student learning and how do we make a difference in policy to impact the system in that way. So thank you for your work. I am supportive of pedagogical performance assessment. We know from work done even 20, 30 years ago by the National Board for Teaching Standards that when they implemented assessment around teaching standards, similar to what we've talked about here in the state around our Utah Effective Teaching Standards, that you get a different impact on student learning when you know what's going into the system. So I think this is a very important discussion. It has huge consequences on children. I know we spend a lot of time talking about how it impacts the adults, but it's really how does this impact children 5, 10 years out and give them opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think that we've hit everybody that wanted to make a comment. So we'll move back to committee discussion. I'm looking for, we've got 15 minutes. We need to give staff direction on these standards. Board Member Davis.
I've indicated before that I use one of these assessments in my job, so I will be abstaining today. However, I do want to say that just publicly, what is in law is that we will be moving to a professional license, an associate license, and an LEA-specific license. We don't have a choice there. Those are the three things that have been put in actual code. But what I want to say to us as a board, and I'm speaking to myself as well, that whatever we vote for today, whether we vote include pedagogical assessments or how that vote turns out, this is not the end. This is the beginning. So I feel like we're at a place where we have to look at what are we doing here. And once whatever decision is made here, then we look at the courses that move from an associate to a professional license. Is there overlap there? Is it wasting people's time? Is it productive? Is it moving teachers toward pedagogical capabilities that they didn't have before? These are all pieces and many more that will go into our work. So I guess I just want to throw that out there, that there's a lot of room to, I believe, continue to refine and improve and grow, and this isn't going to be
Right.
the beginning of the end. This is actually just the beginning.
Thank you. Vice Chair Cummins?
I just wanted to express my appreciation for all the input that we've had over the last few years on this. It's been a very large ongoing conversation. I know the conversation is not over. We still have many rules to consider and many things to come back and look at as we consider the impact of this new program on the state, students and educators alike. But I appreciate the public comment today, and one of the analogies that we used when we first started this task force was, we have a messy closet. Let's pull everything out of the closet and decide what we want to put back and what is it going to look like. And now that we have our closet, we've cleaned it out and we've asked everybody to come and say, okay, what do you think of our closet? I think some people forget what it looked like before, that it was really a disaster. And there was a lot of ways in which people could receive a state license without showing any competency as an educator. And so the intent of the changes that we made were, here's what we have to maintain. We couldn't go back and say we're not going to have an alternate license. That was in law and in code. And that bridge had already been moved over way before anybody on the task force. And so what do we do to elevate the requirements or the competencies that anyone that's coming through some type of an alternate pathway, how do we ensure that the requirement or the competency is the same as it is for those that are coming out of an educator preparation program or a university prepared educator, and what is it? And so that was the intent as we moved through this whole process of, we put the clothes back in. There's only 2 instead of 15 dresses now, but the requirement to get in the closet is the same, and that was the intent and what we were trying to accomplish with all of this. And so I appreciate all of those that have helped to craft this, the many amazing professionals that have given their expertise and their advice and their time onto this. And so I just wanted to express that. And is it okay if I make a motion for recommendation? So I would move that we include little I as our recommendation under E on our...
Okay. Number 1 or 3? You said 3 and
so under E, 5, 5E, 3 little I would be my recommendation for the Utah Pedagogical Performance Assessment Standards.
Thank you. So we have a motion on the table to recommend on subsection E. Is that the correct term? Little I.
Maybe 5E.
5E triple I. The green.
We all know the intent.
Yes. And anyway, so that's the motion on the table. Any discussion to that motion? I was just going to say I agree with that. And that's the one I was going to suggest also.
Yeah, can I?
Board Member Earl.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Yes,
just a couple things, and I agree. That flexibility needs to be built in, and that's what I've heard from, as I've talked with different university entities, professors and such. There are some who are passionate about Edtpa and how wonderful it is, and there are others who want something different. And so I think that it's awesome we have that passion. It's interesting, as I've read a lot of different literature around around the nation, that it's almost that divisive in every other state. I just got done reading something in Illinois where there's a whole conglomeration of research that was put together. The first half was for, the second half was against. And so I just think that there needs to be that flexibility. So I do appreciate the move for green. So anyways, that's my speaking forward.
Is there any other discussion to that recommendation? Board Member Lear.
I think it's the best we can do under the circumstances. I'm not as resigned as Brittany. I am still philosophically really, really troubled by this decision. I, like the really gentlemanly Dr. Harwood, don't see any other way out of this. I feel like we're boxed into a corner. I feel like that when this was put into law, it was with the assistance of the State Board of Education at the time, not necessarily with the assistance and the agreement of the educational community, the education community as a whole. And I'm still very, very troubled that there is a different standard for the profession of teachers than there is for the profession of doctors or lawyers or nurses. I think that is a concession that we were cornered into making, and I don't agree with it, and I want to say that, and I can't say that enough. And I don't think the former system was, it was piecemeal, but I don't think it was necessarily that bad, rather than accepting a situation that allows non-trained people to teach our children, and that's what concerns me. And under the circumstances, I think the best we can do is the flexibility of a pedagogical assessment, and of the standards for one, and I'll go along with it, but I really want to believe Cindy in saying that I hope from here we can move toward a license that's meaningful, because I don't believe that alternative licenses are meaningful. And I worry that LEAs will not have the resources, time, personnel to do the professional development to make it meaningful. And that troubles me, because I think our children, as Dr. Fossen pointed out, our children's competency will be the byproduct of that. So yes, I'm voting for it, not happily.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion to this? Seeing none, the motion on the table is to recommend in 5E triple little I. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Abstain.
With Board Member Davis abstaining. That passes unanimously. We need to, I'm seeking another motion. No, I think we need to pass the whole.
So, sorry.
Go ahead.
I just have a question of clarification.
I guess if the rule didn't
so the
pass.
rule hasn't passed the full board. I mean, do we just, as a formality, want to take action on it? But I mean, I guess
you're
we're not
right.
required.
They did ask, though. So do you have any other? Is it just that spot, or do you want us to look at the whole thing?
I think we would appreciate if you could approve it and move along, even though you're not required to. I don't see anything that would prevent you from, and I know the universities are anxious to know so that they can move forward.
Okay, thank you.
I move that we approve the Utah Pedagogical Performance Assessment Standards as amended.
Okay, so the motion on the table is to approve the Utah Pedagogical Performance Assessment Standards as amended and recommend to the full board for approval, because that's what you need. I mean, we can't do that. Any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Board Member Davis is abstaining. Thank you. We have reached the end of our agenda, and so we will go ahead and adjourn. Thank you all for coming. I know many of you drove a long distance to be here, and we really appreciate all input that we get, so thank you very much. I know. I was getting nervous.
You could be Senator Henderson and look at the